Welcome to Caspian Policy Center's next event. Today is a very important day with us. Good morning to folks joining us from Washington, United States, and good evening for the ones who are joining us from the region. Today, the Caspian Policy Center, together with the United States Agency for International Development and in collaboration with the embassies of Afghanistan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Turkey, and Uzbekistan, we are bringing together experts from the US government agencies and senior policy representatives from the Caspian region to discuss economic policy and infrastructure development implications for the Blue Dot Network. The discussion will cover the Blue Dot Network's development since its inception and how it might grow in the future to address infrastructure needs in the Caspian region. I know we have a lot of speakers from both region and from the US side. I'll be very short in my remarks, and before any further ado, I'd like to hand the floor to our esteemed keynote speaker, Javier Piedra from the United States Agency for International Development, who is a Deputy Assistant Administrator for Asia. Javier, floor is yours, please.
Sorry, I was on mute. So thanks a lot, Efkan. I really appreciate the opportunity to make a few comments in connection with this important event in the Blue Dot Network. So good morning and good afternoon to everyone. I'd like to, of course, thank the Caspian Policy Center for organizing today's discussion. Thank you for having me. For more than 25 years, USAID has partnered with the people of the Caspian region to accelerate their country's development, promote stability, and foster regional connectivity and cooperation. As such, I am honored to be here today and to kick off what I'm sure will be a tremendously beneficial panel discussion on the Blue Dot Network and the expansion of quality infrastructure and capital investment in the Caspian region. So briefly, what is the Blue Dot Network? And to answer this question, you're in very good hands with Dr. Ara, who will be the monitor of the panel, which will have lots of folks who will be asking questions in connection with the Blue Dot Network. And I might also congratulate Stephen Dowd for his new appointment as the Executive Director at the EBRD, and he will make a few comments in connection with the EBRD and the Blue Dot Network. The Blue Dot Network will bring together governments, the private sector, and civil society under shared standards of global infrastructure development. The network will certify infrastructure projects that demonstrate and uphold global infrastructure principles. Certification by the Blue Dot Network will serve as a globally recognized symbol of market-driven, transparent, and financially sustainable development policies. By proposing a common standard of project excellence, BDN, Blue Dot Network, will attract private capital to infrastructure projects in developing and emerging economies. At the heart of today's discussion is a choice, is a critical choice, because a nation is only as strong as its infrastructure, and sustainable, high-quality infrastructure requires a framework for attracting sustainable, high-quality financing. It is a consequential choice because the decisions made now by governments in serving their country's infrastructure needs will affect the strength of their economies and the well-being of their people for generations to come. But most importantly, it is a choice between dependency and autonomy. And as I'm sure you'll see, the Blue Dot Network recognizes and facilitates each nation's journey to self-reliance through responsible infrastructure development. The vision put forward by the Blue Dot Network is one of shared success built on innovative thinking, complementarity of interests, and shared values. A vision that unites all of us in a common purpose to advance economic stability through mutually beneficial interconnectivity. It is no secret that the world is in dire need of infrastructure projects that embody transparency, accountability, and the resilience, and are also financially, environmentally, and socially responsible. As the countries of the greater Caspian region look to attract international business, increased economic prosperity, and realize the vision of enhanced trade and investment, robust investment into critical infrastructures such as ICT, energy pipelines, and transportation routes remain critical to sustainable, long-term, enterprise-driven development. But the need of sustainable infrastructure transcends the Caspian. According to the G20 Global Infrastructure Hub, global infrastructure investment needs for 2020 are currently over 2.5 trillion, and approximately 94 trillion of investments will be needed to meet infrastructure demand by 2040. Indeed, the demand for infrastructure is massive, far more than the current spending levels of both public and private sectors combined. But is it not true that good infrastructure investment is tremendously necessary? Sound infrastructure not only generates local employment during construction, it allows for new and increased opportunities in education, transportation, research, logistics, trade, and ultimately in capital flows, which underpin much of the investment needs of the region. Along with infrastructure comes jobs, and with jobs, stability and family stability. And it also tends to reduce out-migration. In contrast to the certification that BDN would provide, many infrastructure projects end up below quality and even slapstick, even unreliable, over budget, and sometimes dangerous. Doesn't it make sense to adhere to widely agreed upon best practices from the get-go, then risk huge problems down the road? So in conclusion, it is with this in mind and with a deep desire to help build the next generation of infrastructure that USAID, the DFC, the Department of State, and our partners in the multilateral community and with our partner governments have championed the Blue Dot Network. The Blue Dot Network aims to provide that quality and will be a mechanism that will empower countries to work with qualified private sector partners to pursue clear and transparent infrastructure investments that serve the long-term interests of its citizens. And in conclusion, let me just say that anyone who's been reading the policy experts and analysts will know that it seems to be time to move oil and gas west across the Caspian. The consensus seems to be that the Trans-Caspian interconnector makes sense. This is something I throw out to you. What are they saying? What are the specialists saying? It will help increase the region's energy security, help bolster independence and sovereignty, help to have a more equal footing in the energy markets, help the Caucasus and Central Asia become a true crossroads, and help provide Europe with more stable energy. So I'd like to thank my colleagues. I look forward to an exciting a panel led by Dr. Kosh, who is the interagency lead on this. And I'd like to finally thank Efkan, who really has been spectacular in this process, as well as my staff, Kyle Farrell, and all those who have helped to put this together. So thank you very much. Over to you, Efkan.
Thank you, Javier, very much. I think it was excellent introduction for everyone to the topic, and I'll also thank USAID for helping us together to put this event together, and your staff was excellent. And hopefully this will be managing to have our second discussion in a good way as well. Here, I'd like to pass the floor to Dr. Arhab. He is the US G7 Sherpa for Blue Dot Network with the US Agency for International Development. Dr. Arhab, do you hear me? Hello?
If he's not on, has he gotten on yet?
He is on the call, but I think there's a technical problem.
Okay.
Dr. Arhab, do you hear me? maybe we.
If you'd like,
Why don't
this is
we?
Caleb McCary. I'd be happy to talk
Yeah,
a little bit about the
yeah,
background of Blue Dot.
yeah. Why don't you do that, and then I'd like to, after you're done, we can turn to some of the panelists to have their statements. So go ahead, please. Efkan, you can.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Caleb McCary. I'm counselor to this Chief Executive Officer of the Development Finance Corporation. The Blue Dot Network concept actually was born at DFC. And what it was born from was the idea that when we as a development finance organization and other development finance organizations that we partner with around the world do a project, we do them an infrastructure project, we do them to certain standards. We obviously adhere to standards of transparency. We adhere to standards regarding the environment. We adhere to standards regarding social impact. These are the things that we do as a matter of course. And our efforts are always focused on how we can help facilitate financing directly from ourselves, but also leveraging other private sector financing for investments that will be durable, that will generate a profit in the end, but more importantly, be sustainable financially, environmentally, socially, over the long run. As a development finance agency, we also partnering with USAID, who is really a key player in all of this as well. We're in this for the long haul. And so, you know, we will stay with the project for 20, 25 years at times to ensure that it is done right. And so the concept of the Blue Dot Network was to be able to have a process that would permit such projects to be certified as such, that they are sustainable, that they adhere to, in this case, the International Finance Corporation of the World Bank's standards on environment and social impact, that these projects are, these infrastructure projects are viable economically. And so that it could become very clear that there's a way to identify those that are done right, and to recognize that value. So the concept was to create a Blue Dot standard for such projects, and the whole concept behind the Blue Dot itself actually dates back to the 1970s. When the United States launched the Voyager mission to the outer planets. Carl Sagan, who was a physicist and philosopher, suggested to our space agency, NASA, to turn the camera around at one point in the outer solar system and to take a picture of us here on Earth. And the picture that came out was a pale blue dot in space, and that pale blue dot is us. It's Earth, and that's what the Blue Dot is about. It's about being responsible. It's about being sustainable. It's about making sure that the investments that you and we make produce the results for our people and have a development impact, and for the sake, for all of our sake, and for the planet. And so that's the essential concept behind the Blue Dot Network. This is would be a voluntary certification. It would be something that would be set up to be consistent. And we have shared this concept with a number of governments and others, and gotten a positive response. We've also been talking with the private sector about this as well. The notion is not that it be burdensome, but rather that it provide recognition and value added. That's a brief description of the background, genesis, and idea behind the Blue Dot Network, and we'd certainly welcome the opportunity to engage and answer any questions people have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This was I want to transition to our moderator, to Dr. Arha. Please, floor is yours. I think you don't have any technical issues at this point. Can you hear us?
Well, I can hear you, but can you hear me?
We do. Welcome aboard.
Good. Oh, there you go. Anyway, thanks a lot to the Caspian Policy Center and you and everybody else for having this session on the very important topic, and thanks my colleague for already giving the background. So I won't take too much time, but just to put it Blue Dot in very simple terms, relevant terms, all you guys are Caspian and the Black Sea. As Javier mentioned, there is tremendous infrastructure need. That need cannot be met without private sector investment. What is Blue Dot Network? Blue Dot Network is our initiative with like-minded folks to get more private sector investment in infrastructure sector, particularly in the emerging economies. That's what Blue Dot Network is. And so do so, somebody's got to mute their phones, otherwise we've got the tremendous static. I hope it's not me. So again, to capture it, Blue Dot Network is to mobilize more private sector investment into infrastructure sector, particularly the institutional investors who have the big money to invest in infrastructure. Why don't they? Well, they don't because they're not sure. Institutional investors usually invest in areas where they have a high degree, a high probability of return and assurances that their money is not lost. So how do we make sure that happens in the infrastructure sector? Well, let's make sure that the infrastructure abides by widely agreed and adhere to quality infrastructure investment principles that we came out of in G20 last in Osaka trip. And the Blue Dot Network then gives as brand to ensure that it is a good bankable infrastructure project. That is in short what BDN is. There's not a long answer. So in that case, I think what is fascinating, and we'll go through the round and hear from all you colleagues, is to figure out that what are the infrastructure needs in your countries? What have you done to attract private sector investment? How can Blue Dot Network, and you're all welcome to join it, you're joining in means you are committing to the spirit and the letter of the kind of the philosophy of Blue Dot Network, which is that, as my good friend Caleb mentioned, first and foremost is transparency of financing. We got to know how much money, what's coming in, what's going on. That countries are not, whatever the terms are for everybody to see, cannot be a black book. Furthermore, that we are abiding by the important issues, environment and social. Then that is the great impact and benefit of this is to the country and its people and the local economy and the local employment. And we are doing so in as open and transparent manner as we can. That's all there is to it. And it'd be very interesting to see that as DFC has been an active player, and so we launched it with our three founding partners, us and Australia and Japan last November. And the question is, okay, if JPIC is working on digital telecom network issues in Uzbekistan, okay, there's got to be, by definition, and hopefully are, abiding by the BDN ethos and elements that we are, when we've got issues like all the roads and bridges and other issues that we have got going in all your countries, from Afghanistan to Georgia, the train network that connects the Alyat port, the various other ports in Kazakhstan and in Poti in Georgia, all those are the right valuable stuff. And so that is what we have done, as Caleb mentioned, with DFC. DFC's engagement is sort of BDN in concurrence. And how can we get more of this? That's the topic of the question. So with that, I'm going to ask really of Afghan's help in trying to get around on the moderating side of stuff. I think we've got a list of names. We're going down that for about 5 minutes each. I'm told that at 4 minutes, somebody will give you a warning, and then we'll ask to sort of wrap up and move forward. And since I'm the biggest culprit of getting us slightly behind, I'll shut up and turn it over now to our good friend and the representative, Mr. Najrabi, from our embassy of Afghanistan. So over to you, Mr. Najrabi.
Thank you, Mr. Hara. Excellencies, respected representative of USAID, DFC, and Honorable representative of Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Turkey, Uzbekistan, and Georgia. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be a part of this dialogue on quality infrastructure and capital investment in the Caspian, a subject that's timely and important for the region. Let me start by saying that Central and South Asia, including the Caspian, is one of the least integrated regions in the world. Central Asia is probably one of the last regions in the world that has the potential to become a major, a frontier, and a growth market. The opportunities for private sector are huge, and the key is to provide appropriate enabling environment. Now, in order to address the current barriers to trade, investment, and higher economic growth, there is a strong and urgent need for economic cooperation and accelerated integration. This means we need to integrate our transportation, telecom, aviation, supply chain, among others, in order to make it easier and less costly to trade with each other within the region and with other partners outside. We also need to continue improving the government-to-government work, agreements, treaties, etc., to provide an enabling environment for private sector-led economic growth strategy. In general, the Blue.net is an interesting concept. The investment and integration needs of the region are so huge that any new meaningful partnership that positively changes the facts on the ground is welcome news. As you know, Afghanistan is a major non-NATO ally of the US. Afghanistan is currently learning about this new initiative. Issues to consider include: what problems does it solve? How it can complement the existing platforms and forums that involve investment in connectivity and regional cooperation? How can it promote collaboration and win-win partnership with active participation of the private sector? Those are some of the areas that require further exploration. It's important to note that regional connectivity is the key to stability and prosperity in Central Asia, Caspian, and South Asia. Without it, everything that we do as individual countries will face some of the challenges that exist now. As a WTO member, Afghanistan is committed to the implementation of the WTO's Trade Facilitation Agreement and the Road Transportation Convention. It's therefore natural that a key component of our partnerships and efforts with our Central Asian neighbors and partners is focused on expanding and improving practical connectivity to enable more trade, telecom, energy, etc. And the Blue.net would greatly benefit if it takes into account the existing efforts such as CARIC, CASA 1000, TOPI, in order to avoid duplication and instead complement these programs. The regional dynamics are encouraging. Afghanistan's trade volume with Central Asian neighbors has increased substantially. We import over $1 billion worth of goods, electricity, and energy from Central Asia already. This number can go up with improved transportation, which means faster, cheaper, more reliable. A key priority. Our goal is not only to trade with Central and South Asia, but also through them with other major markets like Europe, China, and India. The more we
I think, Mr. Najrabi, I think we were going to get pretty close to the 5 minute. I think you've got the 4 minutes, so I would request that.
I'm just finishing.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. The more prosperous we all can become. So, in conclusion, for Blue.net to become successful, it needs to prove itself as useful in addressing connectivity and infrastructure challenges in Central Asia and the Caspian. The key growth sectors for us are telecom, energy, health, agribusiness, mining, and connectivity infrastructure. We welcome engagement on these topics with colleagues in the US and in Central Asia on these areas of priority, and perhaps the Blue.net can help. Thank you for your attention. I will be happy to take any questions. My colleague and our commercial attaché, Mr. Javed Jia, is also here with us in the panel. So if there is any question, you're welcome to.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the thoughts. And I think we'll move on to Mr. Majidov, the advisor to the Ministry of Economy from Azerbaijan. I know that I've always had great affinity for folks from Caspian, Central Asia, and because we are most gracious people. You have 5 minutes, so I would say to the degree you feel comfortable, you may get down to the crux of the matter so that you can use your 5 minutes most effectively. But over to you, Mr. Majidov.
Thank you very much. Please stop me if I go over this limit. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the invitation. For me, it's the first time participating in this format, in the Blue.net format. And we've been we've been asked to join by our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to which I'm very grateful. That's a very interesting format. But it also means that I personally am in the process of trying to understand more about the processes that are happening in the group. And my presentation will be just probably a set of thoughts to stimulate discussion rather than a structured presentation. Infrastructure in the Caspian and the potential for the new projects. Our perspective as Azerbaijan consists of the fact that we've been heavily investing in our infrastructure during the last decade and a half. This comes from the obvious need for Azerbaijan, the country on the shore of the Caspian Sea, but without a direct entry into the ocean, to improve our connectivity. And I would divide this connectivity needs into 3 levels. I would say we needed, and we still need in some places, to improve connectivity inside the country by making sure that parts of the infrastructure will work together and serve well both domestic and international partners who work with us. The second one is to open up the channels, the transport routes that connect us to larger markets. The channels, for example, that we've built with our partners from Georgia by accessing the Black Sea, and the infrastructure and projects that we've done along the route. And they have both the projects that have to do with ports in Georgia and Azerbaijan working as twin ports, and also a large and important Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway, which is in a sense a game changer because it brings in a new transport format. And it's the project where Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Georgia worked together, overcoming hundreds of technical, legal, and political difficulties. On the other hand, we've built and finished the construction well, as much as port construction is technically possible to be finished because it's a live organism that keeps on changing. But we've built an excellent first-class port on the Caspian Sea. But that brings me to another point. Caspian is a closed sea, and in order to be efficient and work, our port needs twin ports on other sides. So in our case, and it's probably a bit unique, Caspian is the sea where the countries and ports of other countries have to cooperate and coordinate everything they do in order to be efficient. There is no other way. And we see it from our side very well. And we keep on working and pushing for the cooperation of this kind together with our Turkmenian, Kazakhstani, other colleagues. Another dimension, so I came gradually to the regional dimension that is important. And regional dimension is also important for projects like this one, because we become more attractive for international financial institutions, for strategic investors, in case we can present the case of a regional market. The projects become bigger, more important, more profitable, if the region is able to talk to each other and create a common market, or the common market access, at least, for the investor. So this is another point which makes the cooperation unavoidable and necessary. If we want big, large projects, we need to talk to each other a lot and work as a, let's say, coordinated market of some kind.
Okay, Mr. Majidov, I think we're close to the time, and you have another representative from your country.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The third level is how we as a region can reach out to global markets. And well, in this one, different countries have different angles, and they're defined by the size, by geography, by exact location, by lots of other factors. But that's also the game that we have to play. If Azerbaijan sometimes is the source of export and import for Georgia, and sometimes it's the source of transit for that, and the other way around with Central Asia. And you know, understanding this large, let's call it trade and infrastructure picture, and building bilateral, multilateral, and international alliances in order to be efficient and interesting for international, private, and institutional investors is what we have to do. And I'm sure that this network is one of the instruments to help that. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'm at your disposal for questions and answers. Thank you.
That's very kind of you. I think for those, I think very effective and energetic member countries that have more than one person, and because we have gone over 5 minutes, I'm going to jump over the other person and come back to the other second representative in the Q&A directly, so that we get everybody's opening comments out, so we can actually talk about these things a little bit more. So let me go over to Mr. Stephen Dowd now, because I passed you, sir, as my apologies, because Caleb went directly and I went below Caleb. So I appreciate greatly the EBRD, our executive director, who has tremendous experience in it. So Stephen, let me turn over to you, and then we'll come over to the next person on the line. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. Yes, I am new to the job. I've literally been on the job for about a week. I was confirmed by the Senate only last month, or at the end of August, I guess. So it's a new territory to me. However, I'm very familiar with the multilateral development banking world. I served as U.S. Executive Director at the African Development Bank for 3 years. which was quite an experience. Africa is a very unique place. And some of the challenges in standing up the private sector in Africa are similar to those you might find in certain Central Asian countries. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the EBRD, was really founded and filled in really the post-Soviet structure. And it was based on, as Javier noted, free enterprise, democracy, the rule of law. And indeed, the founding document of the bank required that the bank's operations focus on market-oriented economies and the promotion of private and entrepreneurial initiative. So the bank is very active in most of the countries other than Afghanistan, involved in our discussion this morning. And indeed, I believe that the bank may be the largest investor in Uzbekistan and I'm pretty sure Kazakhstan and substantial throughout the region, and certainly Turkey. And so the model of free markets, free enterprise, which is the heart of the Blue Dot concept, has been implemented and adhered to by the EBRD since its founding for the last 30 years, and will continue to be so. So I would encourage, to be as brief as I can be, more alignment with other US agencies, for example, USAID and DFC, would be well positioned to align with the EBRD in developing the private sector. There is an estimated as much as $100 trillion under management worldwide. 100 trillion, that's 14 zeros, I believe, behind the one. And the goal is to get some of this private capital into countries, and the EBRD and other mechanisms are there to foster that, to provide a launching pad, if you will, to attract global foreign investment. And so our mission is to accelerate prosperity, and we want to align with other US government agencies as much as possible, and countries and private sectors wherever possible. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for staying with the time. I think, will that be okay with you, Mr. Mammadova, sir? I think I will come back to you in question answers. You'll be the first one I would reach to, and you'll have more time to answer than just the 2 minutes, if that's all right with you. If not, let me know and I will go forward. But I'll turn right now to our good friend Georgi Zikleyev, the Deputy Chief of Mission here from Georgia. So over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon or good evening to everyone across the oceans. Thank you for having me over. It was actually great listening to the colleagues and the friends across different agencies in US and of course partner countries in the region as well. Once again, kudos to Evgan and his team for putting this together. Once again, it's a great discussion on the topics that are related to the wider region, Central Asia, Caucasus, and across the Eurasia. And of course, once again, it is important to see that there's the initiatives that come from DC, come from the United States, those initiatives closely align with an interest that the countries in the region have. And the initiative that we're discussing today, in particular, it has a particular importance considering the aspects of that initiative related to investments, economic development, regional cooperation, and integration between the countries of the wider Eurasian region. Well, when it comes to Georgia, I can definitely proudly say that from the institutions that are represented today, and EBRD, I just mentioned a number of the countries where it's the largest investor, we do have close to 255 investments that have been made by EBRD across different industries in a volume of $4.5 billion throughout the years. A lot of them are made in infrastructure as well. And we're happy to see that together with DFC that has invested close to $1 billion in Georgia during the past 2 decades. We are looking at the diversification of the portfolios. And when we speak of diversification of portfolios, of course, connectivity is one of the main discussions that we have. And looking at the connectivity, I will kind of switch a little bit from the Caspian region, initial Caspian region, and move to the Black Sea region, considering how important the access to the Black Sea region and through Black Sea to the wider global commons is for all the countries in our part of the world. And as our good friends from the Azerbaijan mentioned, of course, access to the larger market is important to every country, and infrastructural development for the smaller countries like ours and the small economy is definitely needed in order to access those markets in the most efficient way. And of course, when it comes to Georgia, as we all know, our aspirations are close to in alignment with the European aspirations. We want to join the European Union, of course, we want to join the NATO, and of course, in all this process of becoming the part of the Europe, connectivity and infrastructural development and the access to Europe through the Black Sea directly is an important part of that. And some of the initiatives that we're discussing would be digital connectivity, would be transport connectivity, or would be even a development of the human capacity as well. The initiative that I think are closely aligned with the discussion that we have today. So I'll be brief. Of course, I'll try to stay inside the 3 or 4 minutes that I've been given, and I'll be more than happy to engage in a conversation that relates to the Q&A and discuss the specifics of either initiatives or the policies related to our part of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Georgi. Appreciate that immensely. Let's go to Mr. Omarova, the advisor to the International Finance Center from Kazakhstan. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I
apologize. Over to you. Yes.
I would like to say that I have worked recently for EBRD for 10 years in Kazakhstan as a head of office in Astana. Therefore, I know work of international financial institutions in Kazakhstan very well in the sector of infrastructure. Basically, for IFIs, infrastructure is one of the main destinations of their investments. And usually IFIs work very comprehensively, starting from developing legislation for the government of Kazakhstan and then investing. For example, EBRD has invested a lot of money in technical assistance developing concession legislation or renewables legislation, and it took almost 10 years before EBRD started investing in these sectors. Basically, infrastructure requires a lot of effort, not only in legislation development, but also tariffs are key for making infrastructure profitable and sustainable. Therefore, IFIs work a lot on reforms of tariff system in Kazakhstan. EBRD, for example, from 2011 has been involved in tariff project in 8 sectors of Kazakhstani economy, mainly infrastructure sectors. In addition, transparent procurement is also important for getting the right results in infrastructure projects. Therefore, improving state procurement rules and using procurement rules of major IFIs help to attract foreign investors. And finally, support from the state in infrastructure projects that cannot sustain commercial tariffs is also important. Various forms of PPP are necessary in order to attract investors and to finalize projects. In this respect, the government of Kazakhstan has concluded various partnership agreements with IFIs in order to help to co-finance infrastructure projects along IFI money. In respect to AIFC, in 2015, International Financial Center was created also in order to attract foreign investments into infrastructure, and not only infrastructure. And I would like to give a word to Amina Turgulova, who will tell you about AIFC a little bit more and the role of AIFC in infrastructure development.
Thank you very much, Anara. Yes, just a few words. I think in addition to good quality infrastructure products and available institutional investors, we also need a good quality financial infrastructure. And AIFC, in fact, is a project which was established by Kazakhstan in order to improve financial infrastructure, to make this finances of infrastructure project more convenient, comfortable for international investors, but also allow more financing flows into the region. And we have established itself a financial infrastructure, including the independent financial regulator, which complies with IOSCO principles and international financial regulation principles. We have established an international financial court, which is within the common law jurisdiction, is based on the precedents with international judges. We have an international arbitration center. We have an international exchange, which was set up together with two strategic partners, NASDAQ and Shanghai Stock Exchange, and also complies with all necessary requirements of the companies as well as the investors who are part of this exchange. We have also within the AFC, Kazakhstan has established a Kazakhstan Infrastructure Development Fund, totaling of $1 billion US, 250 million have been already invested into infrastructure projects in Kazakhstan. A number of private funds are established currently within the AFC jurisdiction, because the jurisdiction again allows for convenient, easy setup of a fund, and also has unprecedented tax benefits for such funds operations, and a number of private investors are setting up the funds in order to finance infrastructure projects. We're also focusing on best investment principles. Recently, we have set up a Eurasian Green Finance Center, where again, environmentally friendly projects can be financed from the whole region, not just from Kazakhstan. Investors are willing to work under these regulations and the umbrella of AFC. So basically, I see that there is a potential for cooperation with the Blue Dot Network, and we believe that the partners of the Blue Dot Network could find a good support from the AFC infrastructure.
Okay, thank you very much. Our colleague from Uzbekistan, over to you. Oh, sorry, I'm jumping over Turkey. I'm blind right now, so let's go to Turkey first, then to Uzbekistan. Over to you.
Thank you. Let me start by thanking the Caspian Policy Center for this webinar, and as well as for the support to the USAID for organizing this event. Now, I will start by saying that the trade is one of the important pillars of the economic growth in the region. And as mentioned by several speakers, connectivity is an important part to diversify and increase the trade in the region. We believe that the cooperation between our countries at public and private level is very critical to improve the infrastructure and the connectivity. That's why the initiatives like the Blue Dot is very important. And in fact, we consider Caspian region as a very important partner, a very important one. And our companies, especially the construction companies, have been a very key players with regard to several industries, including the construction of infrastructure in the region. Looking at the last 2-3 decades, our trade relations reached to $7.7 billion. More importantly, especially with regard to the issue at hand today, our construction companies consider the region as one of the top markets. In fact, since 1972, 4 of our biggest construction markets are located in the region, and we very much contribute to the development of the infrastructure in all areas in many countries, including Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, and Turkmenistan and Georgia. I have to mention that we are very much involved with the natural gas pipeline project as well, including Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline and Azerbaijan-Turkey natural gas pipeline. Further, we have also started operating the Baku-Tbilisi Kars Railway, and we hope to increase the capacity to 17 million tons of cargo by 2034. In fact, improving what we have called the middle corridor, which begins in Turkey and passes through the Georgia, Azerbaijan, reaching China, is one of the important infrastructure projects in this sense. We have to mention, we very much welcome the Blue Dot Network initiative. Our companies are very much interested in this region, and we will be very much willing and enthusiastic to contribute to the initiative. That's why we are looking forward to the meeting on the September 23rd of this month and we have already announced the event to all of our companies, and we are looking forward to the results of that meeting. We need such platforms to work more closely in the region and with our all stakeholders. And we have already joint financing projects with US Exim Bank, with UK Exim Bank, as well as we have extensive experience working with the World Bank, EBRD, in different projects in this region. We believe that our companies, especially with regard to the capital investments, private capital investments, have the ability and the capability to contribute to Blue Dot network. That's why we will be very much interested to have a follow-up meeting after the 23rd with all interested parties on how we can move forward, especially in terms of increasing the financing for the private sector. I have to mention that the Trans-Caspian Trade and Transit Corridor reflects around $600 billion of business volume, and we will support any initiative which will help improve the country's access to trade and the business environment all over the world. This is all I would like to add in the 4 minutes, and if there's any question, I will be happy to respond. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I think we turn over now to our colleague from Uzbekistan. And right after Uzbekistan, I will go back to our Azeri colleague, which I overlooked, Ms. Mamadova, before moving over to the concluding and opening of a Q&A. Over to our Uzbek colleague.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, or maybe good evening to our colleagues from across the globe. My name is Ilfan Murzakov, and I represent the Ministry of Economic Development and Poverty Reduction. Frankly speaking, I'm quite new to this Blue Dot Network initiative. However, let me give you brief information on the infrastructure investment and also the projects which are running at the moment. I'd like to start with that the point that this year's let's say harder times with the COVID pandemic kind of give a little lesson to, I guess, to everyone, including us as well. Some addressed measures and also policies taking to combat the crisis kind of squeeze some investment needs in infrastructure to other, let's say, sectors of the economy, mainly supporting the SME and also the people. However, you know that Uzbekistan is a double landlocked country, the connectivity and also the infrastructure is really important for us. We've been working with the many IFIs, but also we have the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which is mainly these funds. This SWF's funds usually channel to the investment projects in Uzbekistan. We are, I know that our Deputy Prime Minister have met Blue Dot Network, I guess, CEO, and then we really support and we are kind of excited to be part of this initiative because we understand that in the short and also middle term that quality infrastructure is really important for us. Due to this need, so we had established a new PPP agency, public-private partnership agency. So we have, I would say, numerous projects are running. So we are really open to have a relationship in this field, especially in the field of energy, transport, education, health, and also the connectivity, digital connectivity issues. So. That's it for me. Thank you very much. So I'm open to questions if you have any. Thank you.
Well, thank you again, my good friend, for staying within time. I'm much obliged to you. So over to our colleague from Azerbaijan, and with my sincere apologies for running over earlier. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Caspian Policy Center, and thank you, Afghan, for organizing this event and having me. It's a pleasure to join the panel, and the topic is very timely and important, and we're happy to share our perspective on this issue. So if we create a quality infrastructure that adequately supports business, then companies across the country and region can benefit from enhanced connectivity, facilitation of trade in goods and services, and access to a wider pool of talent. So it makes sense from an economic point of view. And from geopolitical perspective, new initiatives in the Caspian can provide additional boost to US-Azerbaijan partnership and transregional cooperation. Critical energy transportation projects realized with the support of the United States today truly count as success stories. These projects contribute to diversification of energy sources and transportation routes in Europe. In May, Albania started to receive first molecules of Azerbaijani gas. Southern Gas Corridor is nearing completion, and we look forward beyond the contracted volumes to be delivered via the Southern Gas Corridor. Natural gas from Azerbaijan can penetrate into the networks of Western Balkans through well-built and sophisticated interconnectors. However, we can't afford dismissing one important prerequisite, and that is, it's about motivating the companies and consortiums to engage further in production of natural gas. They need a strong message of political support from Europe and the United States, which will positively influence their future investment decisions in offshore natural gas fields of Azerbaijan. Over the past 20 years, $270 billion have been invested in Azerbaijan. And throughout these years, we've proved to be politically, economically, and legally reliable and predictable partner. Over the last 10 years, the government itself had invested more than $25 billion in transport infrastructure alone. All infrastructure projects implemented in Azerbaijan were implemented without borrowing. Azerbaijan's external debt is only 19% of GDP, and we have a strategy to reduce it to 10%. We've been successfully cooperating with the United States for many years. We share a common interest in developing the Trans-Caspian energy infrastructure. In addition to energy, we're interested in becoming a regional digital hub. For future success stories in the region, further support of the United States is crucial. Continued partnership in the region is equally important. And to do that, of course, we need to take care and continue to take care about the favorable investment regime. We have to safeguard that. As for funding, increasing the range of funding options, starting with private investments, will help to upgrade infrastructure the region needs. We need more affordable and bankable PPPs, because they not only do not create a new debt obligation for government, but also improve service quality and efficiency that private sector brings in. The next point is protection of critical infrastructure, how we can do that. It's a very important issue, and the recent event at the Azerbaijan-Armenian border reminded us of that. We face a situation where the Armenian armed forces were targeting, among others, international energy and transportation projects, which are not only important for Azerbaijan, but important for smooth functioning of trans-regional corridors connecting the wider Eurasian region. And in this context, US has a special role to play, both as a country which has been supporting the same very project from the day one, and as a member of the OEC Minsk group. We'd be happy to learn more about the Blue Dot Network initiatives. We've been closely following this since the advancement, and but we need to more understand how the BDN may contribute to increasing economic prosperity in the region. There are some practical issues, for example, about the certification scheme. Why the minimum requirements of all the certification are not international standards, but instead G7. So how the companies in developing countries can meet those requirements. And also, what would be, how would you see what would be the added value of BDN as a new cooperation framework? I thank you.
Right. Yes, thank you very much. So let's turn it to Ambassador Sekudev as our last, and then we can open up for Q&A. So over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that.
And one thing I will say that I've written to folks that if you're not speaking, please mute your phone so that we don't have the static. Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Sorry for the small feedback problem. I'm unmuted. The one thing I wanted to come back to is remarks that Deputy Administrator Pedro said at the beginning, and that's talking about what the Oxford Economics Global Infrastructure Outlook study back in July 2017 found. And that is the totally, and they didn't look at all 200 countries, look at only about 56 countries. But they found in those 56 countries, they need $24 trillion in infrastructure investments by 2040. But based on the then current investment trends, they were only going to find 79 trillion. That left a $15 trillion gap. 3 countries in the greater Caspian region were looked at in the course of that study: Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Turkey. In Azerbaijan, they found they would need $100 billion in investment. They'd likely get 92 billion. That would leave an $8 billion gap. Kazakhstan would need $208 billion in infrastructure investments. Could probably come up with, Kazakhstan would need about $292 billion. They could come up with $208 billion. That was going to leave them with an $84 billion gap. Turkey, which is by the largest population, largest economy in that region, they found that they were going to need $975 billion. They could probably obtain $569 billion. That left Turkey with a $405 billion gap. The needs for these countries in infrastructure development are tremendous. At the same time, though, developed countries are also looking for infrastructure development money. The United States, that study found, would face a $3.8 trillion gap. China, India, other countries are also looking for money. So there's global competition for cash, global competition for investment funds. Sorry. But there's something else. That picture is before February 9th, 2020. That picture is before COVID. And so since COVID, many of these governments have had to move funds. They've had to invest in healthcare. They've had to do other things that would improve the situation in the country, help their country meet the immediate needs. So they've had to rechannel funds to address medical, social, and other immediate impacts of the virus. They're also facing problems, may likely face problems in terms of debt service. You may have to look at rescheduling. These are things that could make life more difficult even than we talked about in 2017. And our asked Mr. Dowd unfair questions that you just got on the job a week ago, if EBRD is looking at some of these things and how these countries are going to be able to cover these costs that are coming up in the course of COVID. But I note this with the idea that there is great need, there's great potential, but there's great need for project financing in the countries of the greater Caspian region. The conditions in each of these countries vary, but our studies show that they all need outside investment. They each have young and growing populations that are also well educated and highly skilled, and very hungry to work. And these countries need to foster job creation to meet the demands of that growing young population, to boost countries' prosperity, independence, and well-being, and to strengthen security in the region. I think the Blue Dot Network is an important step forward. It's something that can help the countries of this region achieve these ends. It can help them find the revenues they need. It can help them compete better in private capital markets. It can help mobilize institutional financing. But I think one thing which we haven't really talked about, but which is something that does come up in the press, and that is sometimes there are statements by some public officials which tend to sort of create an idea of competition for influence within the region, within Central Asia. In the case of Blue Dot Network, I think that's sort of dangerous. I think it can undercut what it is we're trying to do here. The countries of this region are generally non-aligned. They are pursuing what they would call independent or multi-vector or neutral foreign policies as they look to advance their independence and national well-being. And it's a part of the world where the neighbors are not always terribly easy to get along with, but it's a part of the world where these countries do have to find ways forward. So I think as we look and we move forward here, and we help sort of formulate the Blue Dot Network and we bring countries in, joining the Blue Dot Network is something that will benefit the countries of the greater Caspian region. It is not something that's directed against anybody, but it is a way to help these countries obtain the funds, the project financing needed to build their economies and to strengthen regional stability and prosperity, especially given the dislocations that have been produced by the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador. So I think you asked a question for our EBRD colleague. Let me answer some of the questions that were brought about by our colleagues, and then I'll turn it over to your question to the EBRD colleague, and I'll look for assistance from other questions that the panelists or others want to ask from our Afghan and the CPC. So as the ambassador said, and a lot of people talked about it on the importance of Blue Dot and the big infrastructure gaps, I'll give 3 points for you to consider. One, as all of you have indicated, that Caspian countries and the Black Sea countries are really they are the bridge between the 2 big land masses, the Asia and certainly Europe. And so the connectivity of getting to the markets, the big market, to some of you, Europe is closer, but certainly Asia is still there. You talk to the middle corridor, as my good friend from Turkey, so it's always good to hear my good friend Fred Starr re-quoted to me on, you know, the northern corridor, the middle corridor, and the southern corridor. So I'm glad that his influence is good and palpable among this group and the work that we do together. So I think, it is not only a critical country, as a lot of you talked about individually, but collectively the region is very critical for global and transcontinental connectivity, and you've laid them out. And so as a result, we have the EU Connectivity Initiative, or very similar, looking at energy, transportation, digital. So that's a big geopolitical context. Within that context, then, as was articulated by a lot of people, that there is a tremendous infrastructure need for the good of your individual country, good for the region, good for the continent. There is a greater demand than there is a supply at the moment, but as people have looked at it, if you looked at the institutional investors, they have a lot of money. So there's a lot of money here and there's a lot of demand here. And we need to make sure how we can mix this and match it. To that end, Blue Dot Network is precisely put in and developed to address that particular issue, to develop and raise the profile of good infrastructure, and by so doing, get more private sector investment in it. Pretty much more directly, if you're taking DFC money, you'll have to sort of kind of engage in the BDN, as Adam Bowler and other DFC colleagues. You're going to take EXIM money, if you're taking EBRD investment, by definition, you are fulfilling BDN ethos. And so we're not coming up with new standards or new principles. This is operationalizing existing standards and existing principles of good infrastructure. Very important. So if you're taking DFC, EBRD, JBIC, and EXIM money, you're already doing what BDN would ask for. It is just that, as opposed to leaving this out there, we are raising that profile of that good infrastructure. So that is the poti pork in Georgia. That is the train that you talked about between Azerbaijan and Georgia. That is the connecting between the Caspian and the Black Sea. That is the port in Alyat. That is the port that you're working on Kazakhstan and Korea. This is the Herat Uzbekistan railroad that you're referring in Afghanistan. So I fully understand when people say how this is related to Karak and how this is related to CASA 1000. Those are regional initiatives. There will be several such regional initiatives. The BDN is not a regional initiative. It just says wherever you're doing infrastructure at a project-based level, that you're abiding by the best practices. And if you're taking DFC EXIM money, you are abiding by best practices. Otherwise, those will not be submitting in you. And so so in some ways, it's very simple and straightforward, but at the same time, it's quite profound. By elevating good infrastructure and by branding it, by requiring it such on with existing efforts, you're raising the profile and asking for greater investment in it. I heard from our Kazakhstan colleagues that you have several such funds of infrastructure, whether it's be domestically for you or the green or different colors infrastructure funds, and also financial infrastructure. Those are all issues that our DFC colleagues have sort of been very willing to sort of partner with you and contribute to it, with the idea that what comes out of them then is abides by, and then above all, the issue is one of transparency. Above all, I think you follow it, that would be the one. So anyway, that's hopefully answers a lot of the questions that were raised. But once again, I'll have Ambassador Saruka repeat your question for a good colleague from EBRD, and then I'll turn it over to Stephen to answer that. Over to you, Ambassador Saruka.
Hi, yes, Steve, if you wouldn't mind, the question is EBRD looking at this, at the question of how COVID is affecting financial, the needs for investment levels in the region, and sort of where sort of the debt picture may be going for other countries in the Caspian region? Again, you're only on the job for 1 week, so I'm sympathetic, you know, it may have put you in a lousy spot.
No, it's quite all right, Ambassador, and thank you for the question, really. I think I could add a couple things, as you correctly point out. I haven't been there all that long. But with respect to the COVID, the bank has dedicated the balance of its lending activity in 2020 exclusively to COVID focused projects. Beyond that, in terms of the Caspian area, certainly the US chair, our chair, is pushing mightily to continue to ramp up in Central Asia. For example, Uzbekistan, which I consider an inspiring story at the EBRD. I believe that 5 years ago, our portfolio there was basically zero. And today I think it's north of 500 million. That's a nice jump. I think Kazakhstan is another one where we are very enthusiastic. As I stated previously, I believe the bank's second largest overall client country is indeed Turkey. So the bank is focusing, and certainly under the guidelines, you know, that we all agree on in the Blue Dot Network, which is sort of a counterpoint to the Belt and Road. I don't think we want to get bogged down in the Belt and Road discussion in this setting. I would also add, Ambassador, another element that's interesting. The bank has been considering for quite some years to expand its portfolio countries into sub-Saharan Africa. Well, I have quite a bit of expertise on that issue, but without getting into the specifics, the bank, partly at our chair's insistence, has postponed such expansion in order to get the job done in its existing portfolio, which certainly includes all the countries we are discussing this morning. So we are very focused on the region and will continue to be so, to do so. Thanks.
Right, thank you very much, Stephen. Appreciate that. And you bring a very rich perspective, both from Africa and now increasingly the European way, looking not only in its neighborhood, so to speak, a wide neighborhood. Let me, if folks are there, please feel free to give me questions. I'll ask, I have a couple of that I may ask for our Azeri colleagues as you were talking. You know, you sit on a pretty important, so not only do we have to look at the Caspian, but the connection between the Caspian and the Black Sea, and by so doing, you are then opening up and connecting Central Asia to Europe. So as you are doing the big project, whether it be on your Aliyat port or the rail network or the logistics center around Aliyat port, that will play that particular role, as you said, you want to be a digital hub and also a infrastructure hub. How would you see Blue Dot Network and the opportunities for more private sector investment, and also at the same time, not only do you attract more private sector investment, but you take pride and being sort of some of the model sort of high quality infrastructure connecting the Caspian and the Black Sea. So I'll appreciate your thoughts on that. I defer to any one of you two who wants to take that question. And then I'll ask the same for the Georgian colleagues to provide the response to that as well. Over to Azerbaijan, whoever wants to answer that.
May I have a short contribution, if you don't mind?
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. This is how we see ourselves. And the backbone of Azerbaijani transport infrastructure is by and large ready. It requires permanent work on, it requires permanent upgrades, and we do that with railways by upgrading the electrical systems, signaling systems of railways, improving its average speed, and so on. As you rightly said, Alat has been a major move. And similar works are happening along basically all types of regional, well, say, connecting and transit infrastructure. Where we are now and what can be interesting is various value-added, value-bringing projects that can work, let's say, on the fundament of the improved state transport infrastructure, but bringing in new expertise, bringing in new solutions, new technologies, and connecting markets. You may have heard about the new Azerbaijani law on free economic zones. It's a no compromise law, very attractive for investors, and the location for that is right in the middle of let's say, Azerbaijani infrastructural connections. It's Alat Port, it's the West-East Corridor, and its major roads, autobahns. So lots of value added can be created over there. And we believe that will turn into a Caspian, let's say, logistical and investment hub for simple demographic and geographic reasons. And we suggest that our partners go along this logic. It is always easier and, let's say, more comfortable.
I'm going to ask some other questions. I'll ask you to wrap it up so I can get one or two more questions in. Over, back to you. Sorry.
I beg your pardon, I didn't pick up, sorry.
I said I only have 9 more minutes, so I want to get some more people to answer.
I'll stop there. What we think is it's now time to do value-added type projects based on what's been done, following up on that and creating more value. And this is where the place for private investor is. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know if you guys can hear me, but I've just lost. Okay, I think you're back on. Good. Let me ask Georgia now. How do you see it? I think we'd appreciate your quick thoughts on it.
Of course. Thank you for that really important question. Well, this is a question that we probably internally in Georgia have been discussing for more than a decade now, and trying to understand the formula of what makes a specific place a point of interest for not only international financial institutions, but for an average retail investor as well. And by looking at the success of different countries that have went through the similar paths, the answer is probably quite easy. And it's a combination of different things. You have to make sure that you have strong and independent institutions. You have to make sure there is a rule of law, and you have to make sure that the business environment in itself is friendly to retail and institutional investors as well. Once you have the combination of those three, it's the flow of money and the volume of investments, the private investments in the country will definitely increase. And the increase of that money will increase the trust towards the country as well. And together with that, of course, comes an economic development. Well, and this is something that we've been pursuing in Georgia for years. We've been reforming the internal business environment as much as possible and as fast as possible. And that process has been painful at a lot of times, considering the past legacies that we had. We've been investing heavily in infrastructural development. We've been, together with the help of the US aid and other partners, strengthening the institutions in Georgia. And of course, we've been closely cooperating with our friends across the Black Sea and European Union to make sure that the Georgian legislation based on the association agreement that we have with the EU is in line and full compliance with the European and the global practices and the standards. And we do see some of the results of that. I did mention the EBRD and its portfolio in Georgia. And the reason I mentioned that, and that was relayed by some of the other speakers, is that most of that money do come from the requirements. And by definition, when you invest $5.5 billion in a small economy like Georgia, that means that you have a certain level of trust. When you have a DFC and this portfolio in Georgia is close to $1 billion, and you have commitment of $500 million in addition, that means that there is a certain level of trust and there is a certain level of commitment in the long run that is visible as well, not only to the institutionals, but to the retail investors as well. And when we speak of retail investments, you mentioned the Poti port. That's port in itself, and other port developments that I envisioned in Georgia would be Tanakhli and others. They are all the part of the big idea of connecting the wider Caspian, including the Black Sea region, to the Eastern Mediterranean and then the global commons. And of course, connecting the European market to the Central Asian and the overall Eurasian markets via the regional countries, Azerbaijan and Georgia. And for us as the local markets, of course, in the local countries, the outcome of that is an economic development, which we definitely see that with these challenges that all of the countries face in COVID is twice as important to make sure that we stay on the right path and that we are committing ourselves to cooperation in the region. But without the cooperation, without the common understanding of the certain issues, I think that would be hard to convince the global investors to look at the country, to look at the region in the long run.
I think I've got quite a few questions here. It says I can go up to 9:28, but anyway, so there are 3 questions that I've got in the list. One, there's a question about how does Blue Dot Network affect the security of the Caspian region. Another one on our Kazakh colleagues to ask what's the status of the Caspian port developments in Aktau and Atyrau. Certainly that was another question related to how does it affect sort of the digital network within the Caspian region as well. So I don't know whether we have the time to have that question answered here, since I'm told that we're going to wrap up at 9:30. But I want to at least flag the important points that we can raise it at the next discussion with the private sector. A couple of things. Certainly, good infrastructure that works for the benefit of the people and the region is the most solid way of ensuring the security of the region. So if you do good infrastructure, certainly with that, an assurance that you heard, build the security. We can dig into that a little bit deeper. I would defer to our Kazakh colleague to give the update on what the status of their ports are. Digital infrastructure, I think electric power and also transportation, and as Javier mentioned earlier on sort of natural resources, Central Asia with the big supply and the demand in Europe, I think all make for very robust infrastructure opportunities. Certainly undersea cables and other issues are important things going across both oceans on digital side of stuff to the degree of relevance. And that is certainly envisaged any infrastructure under the Blue Dot Network sort of concept. I also want to recognize that I didn't have the time to ask our Uzbek colleagues, just I want to sort of again applaud and back up what my good friend Steve Dowd from EBRD mentioned. I think Uzbekistan is certainly the center and the heart, both the cultural, demographic, and geographical in Central Asia, and a key place, and want to applaud the nation in the trajectory that is taking on the rule of law and others. So it's certainly an interesting option, and we appreciate your forward-leaning stuff in support of Blue Dot Network, because through Uzbekistan, the connectivity within the entire Central Asia and certainly over to Caucasus is a critical part. I also want to recognize our Turkish colleagues, and I appreciate the private sector investment, because certainly the Turkish private, I think technical companies are the main sort of drivers, a lot of the connectivity within the region. So appreciate your particular statement and efforts in it. And certainly on the Kazakhstan, as was mentioned, are pretty well positioned with pretty robust both financial infrastructure and infrastructure funds, and are good and strong and long partners in Afghanistan on not only working on several from Tapi to Kasa to Karak to the railroad and the various sort of ring road and others that we are engaged in building in the Afghanistan side of stuff. So it has been a great honor, and I appreciate the time that you have given to talking about Blue Dot Network. I'm going to turn it over to our host here for concluding remarks. But just again, to conclude by saying, I appreciate your questions. I think the legitimate question is what are the value added from BDN, what it tried to address. I hope that that is relatively clear. It is not another complicated initiative like CASA or TAPI or CAREC or any of those. It is a project-based stuff which just says we need to further more good infrastructure project, and by so doing, get more private sector investment in it. And because we take a project-based issue, as my good friend mentioned from the ambassador Sekuta on this, it is sort of little bit trying to stay out of the politics of it and focus more on good infrastructure projects which have transparency, so that we can champion the heck out of it to get private sector investment in it. That's what it is, and that's what's in it for the regional center. And look forward to following with all of you as good, strong partners of the network as we go forward. So with that, let me turn it over to Javier. I guess I see you, so you, and then to our host for conclusion. Over to you.
Yeah, I thank you very much. Just a few concluding remarks. First of all, I'd again like to thank Efkan and his team and all the panelists for participating in this important event. I really do look forward to the event later this month in connection with the private sector, so that we can better develop a relationship and inform the private sector the importance of the Blue Dot Network and certainly of infrastructure. So thank you very much, Kosh, for your moderation of this panel. It was excellent as usual. And I pass it back to Efkan, and thanks so much for everything. Over. Efkan.
Thank you, Javier. Thanks, everyone. First, I'd like to thank both USAID and CPC, especially Kyle and Matilda on this. And I believe that with its goals of bringing together stakeholders from the private and public sectors to establish a shared framework for quality and market-driven global infrastructure ventures, the Blue Dot Network has the potential to help the Caspian region build a broad set of partners around the world. As the network grows and becomes more defined, understanding it may be crucial to navigating the world infrastructure, investment, and international development. I believe that our second discussion will also be very helpful. And I'd like to in person thank to every speaker that we had today, starting with Javier, Pedra, Dr. Kosh Arha, Stephen Dowd, I'll read everyone's name actually, Khalid Makari, Abdul Nadi Nejrabi, Emil Majidov from Baku, Husniya Mamadova from Baku, Georgi Skolia from Washington but representing Georgia, Anara Marova from Kazakhstan, Amina Turgulova from Kazakhstan, Attila Bastırmacı from Turkey, Ilham Umurzakov from Uzbekistan, and our dear Ambassador Sekuta from Washington. Thanks all joining for us for this event. On September 23rd, we'll be having our second event on the Blue Dot Network. We would like to welcome primarily the private business representatives, and that will be more of a virtual roundtable where we'll be having more representatives from the countries, probably multiple one of them, ports and other infrastructure players. And please tune in to CPC on September 23rd at 9 a.m. again, Washington time. Thanks everyone, and we're ready here to help any further questions regarding the Blue Dot Network together with the USAID. Thanks everyone. Steve, you wanted to say something?